Testing, testing, one, two. Test one, two, three.
Ready? Good evening. Welcome to Phoenix #1 board meeting on June 25th. It is 5:16 and I'm calling this meeting to order. Moving on to our tribal land acknowledgement. In partnership with the tribes who called Phoenix their home first, we acknowledge and respect the land our schools are built on. We commit to being a strong partner with any and all tribal nations who entrust their children to our schools. We are grateful and honored to be partners. Make it a roll call.
Good evening. Roll call for Ms. Jessica Bueno,
Here.
Mr. Regional Carrillo, Ms. Erica de la Rosa, Dr. Alicia Vink,
Here.
and Ms. Carmen Trujillo.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have quorum to begin the meeting, and I will ask to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Is there a recommendation for the adoption of the agenda?
Madam President, I recommend that you adopt the agenda as it stands.
Thank you. May I get a motion?
Alicia Vink, so moved. This is Carmen Trujillo, I'll second.
Roll call for Ms. Jessica Bueno,
Aye.
Dr. Alicia Vink,
Aye.
and Ms. Carmen Trujillo.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to awards, recognitions, and announcements. Today we are celebrating registration for before and after school care. We are thrilled to announce a new partnership between Phoenix #1 and the YMCA, offering no cost before and after school care services for students aged 5 and above for the 2024-2025 school year. Online registration is now open and paper registration forms are available at all our offices. There is no wait list or lottery for YMCA programs. Every family who registers will have a spot in the before and after school programs at their home school. Thank you. Go to my right.
Next, we've got our Leadership Retreat and Business Services Day. During the week of June 10th, Phoenix #1 leaders dedicated their time and efforts to ensuring our district continues to grow in the right direction through a Leadership Retreat and Business Services Day. Instructional leaders collaborated to focus on supporting a higher degree of instructional coherence for our students. Administrators and their staff gathered to learn the latest information from our business services and HR teams. This week of learning will undoubtedly have a long-lasting positive impact on our district. Congratulations.
End of the year celebration with office staff. On June 13th, we celebrated our office staff to thank them for their hard work throughout the year and for taking on the responsibility of training each other on various aspects of the front office role. Our office staff are often the first welcoming presence at our schools, and we appreciate their efforts to improve our customer service ratings and streamline our routines and procedures.
Yay. Faith North 5-star rating, first rating. No, 5-star quality first rating. We are proud to announce that Quality First has awarded our preschool program at Faith North a 5-star rating. Quality First assesses programs using valid and reliable tools that focus on key components of quality early care, including adult-child interactions, learning environments, and staff qualifications. The 5-star rating indicates that our program exceeds quality standards for early learning. Congratulations to the team at Faith North. Yay, that was cool.
Next up, we have summer programs at our Family Center. Our Phoenix #1 Family Center has been hosting a variety of fantastic events for our families this summer. On Mondays, families gather for Mario Kart Mania, and on Wednesdays, we have Minecraft Frenzy. The Family Center has also hosted special events like Art Day, Science Day, Mindfulness Day, and a community picnic. Keep an eye on the Family Center calendar for more fun events that which you can find online at phoenixschools.org. Thank you.
And that is all for our awards, recognitions, and announcements. We are moving on to B, current event summary. Number 1, superintendent's report.
Thank you, Madam President. Welcome, board members, cabinet members, community. We are incredibly proud to announce that 3 of our schools were just awarded the 21st Century Community Schools Grant. Congratulations to Emerson, Lowell, and Capital, and to our federal programs team led by Ms. Sherry Zeeb. These grants are 5-year grants that total $1.5 million. This will allow us to work with community agencies to provide enrichment for tutoring our students. And speaking of good things for our students, we know that student attendance and healthcare needs impact student outcomes if they go unaddressed. These community partnership activities are inputs that have assisted with student health needs so they can continue to be present at school while receiving care or miss minimal school to be able to attend a much needed appointment such as an eye care appointment, a dental appointment, an immunization, or an asthma treatment, or general primary care. This year, our partners have provided services to 358 students at 10 of our campuses. And so we want to take a moment to thank our different partners, Big Smiles, Maricopa County Public Health Office of Oral Health, Wesley Clinic, the Lions Club, Complete Vision Care, and Breath Mobile. And as I wrap up this report, I do want to take a moment to make sure that we are cognizant of some of the celebrations that we have in June. In particular, Juneteenth, a day that is marked as the emancipation of slaves following the end of the Civil War. And at the end of this week, we mark the anniversary of the Stonewall riots and the first Pride Parade 54 years ago. Commemorating these events is really important because it reminds us of the importance of ensuring that every member of our community has a voice, feels safe and heard and seen every day. These important events speak of the critical nature of ensuring that all people receive equal protections for the right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This concludes my report.
Thank you. Number 2, board members' reports. Nope, me either. Moving on to student outcome focused governance. Number 1.
Madam President, I'm going to let you start us off on our student outcomes focused governance. I'm very excited to talk about our next agenda item.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to start with our student outcome focused governance grounding. We will begin with student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change, or said differently, when placed in the context of governing, patterns of behavior that are exhibited in the boardroom can reasonably be expected to be found paralleled in the classroom. This concept, which offers a summation of the current literature on board behaviors and their relationships to improving student outcomes, is as simple as it is profounding. The intention of the governance framework is to translate existing research and the collective experience of dozens of board members and superintendents into a set of tools that boards can use to identify what's working and what's not working, as well as to track progress along their journey toward improving student outcomes. Next slide. Thank you. The framework is built around 6 researched informed competencies that describe school board behaviors and the degree to which they create the conditions for improvements in student outcomes. 1, vision and goals. The responsibility of the board is to carry out the vision and of the community. School systems exist for one reason: to increase what students know and are able to do, and to provide students with knowledge and skills to improve student outcomes. 2nd, our values and guardrails. In governing, board members represent the vision and values of the community, and they rely on the superintendent to determine how to accomplish the vision while honoring the values. Number 3, monitoring and accountability. The boards may adopt goals, but the effective use of time monitoring the goals are a skill the board needs to develop in order to hold the educational system accountable. Number 4, communication and collaboration. The board will lead with transparency and include stakeholders in the pursuit of the goals. Number 5, unity and trust. The board will lead with one voice in its pursuit of the goals. Number 6, the continuous improvement. The board must be dedicated to the cycle of continuous improvement by paying attention to what's working and what's not working. Next slide. Here are the 5 board goals that we have adopted. The goals should be specific, measurable, attainable, results-focused, and time-bound. Interim goals are the progress measures for each board goal. As you can see, our board goals are focused, our first 2 are focused on early childhood literacy and mathematics. Our 3rd goal is around our English learners, and our last 2 goals are around our middle school years literacy and mathematics. Next slide. We also have our superintendent guardrails. Giving a superintendent freedom to do their job, guardrails offer the right balance of guidance and freedom to support the work while also maintaining student outcomes in focus. Next, we also have our board guardrails that will help the board also stay in their lane and focus on student outcomes. Thank you. So this evening, admin will be presenting on goal number 4, which is our 8th grade literacy. And I will pass it over to Dr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to begin by saying I am very excited about this presentation, not necessarily because we hit our target. We did not. We are very close, though. But what I'm excited about are the conversations that the progress monitoring has elicited. And I think it's important for us to engage in these conversations because it is really helping us dig into a theory of action around what we do differently to be able to get the student outcomes we know that our students are capable of. So I'm going to be sharing this presentation this evening with Dr. Lloyd and Dr. Ailshire. So if you'll go to the next slide. This is our goal that the percentage of our 8th grade students with a pass rate on reading per the AASA will increase from 29% on August of 2023 to 44% by August of 2028. And if you look at our target for 2024, it's at 32%. If you go ahead and look at the next page, you will see we got to 31%. So we are 1 percentage point away from hitting our goal. It is a celebration because I know that people worked incredibly hard for this, but it isn't where we wanted to be. So I don't want to diminish the work that people have done or in any way put down what people have been working on, but I do want to recognize that it's not yet what we want to see. So now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lloyd, who will talk a little bit about some of the data that we have on this slide.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. Members of the board, thank you for having me again to be here with you. So one of the things that you'll notice in our groups that we did have one of our groups, the African-American group of students who met the target for them. And then we had others who were in the red, meaning that they were less than 80% of the way towards their target. And then those in the yellow who were within 80% of it, but did not hit the target. And so I'm trying to remember what else to share on this slide, Dr. Gonzalez.
One of the things that we'd like to point out is that because of the progress monitoring that we've been doing, we've been having strategic conversations along the way. And you may recall at a meeting a few months ago, we discussed the fact that our African-American students were the lower performing group. And so I think that by shining a light on the areas that we need to continue to work on, it's really helping us to make strategic decisions to move forward. And so these kinds of reports, while it's heartbreaking to say somebody isn't meeting the target and that we're not getting where we wanted to be by this time, it is an important conversation for us to have. And so if we go to the next slide, we have our first question. And this is a question from President Bueno. Our emergent bilingual students have continuously been the group of students needing the most support. How will the 24-25 fiscal year budget reflect this reality? And is this a strategy addressed in Initiative 2? So what I can say is that part of the work that we're doing in our budgeting and as we were looking at all of these, coming up with a theory of action of what needs to happen. And so we hinted at this in our last presentation that our emergent bilinguals do need additional support. And so we've looked at building focus schools, and I don't mean building, like constructing, but having focus schools where we are paying close attention to the work that is happening at those schools and making sure that the teachers and the leaders and the families all have a level of support that is above and beyond what is typically provided at a school setting. So that includes making sure that we have additional support for English language learners. This year in our budget, we moved the English language interventionists to be able to make sure that every school has those and that they're not coming out of the title budget, which is subject to change based on cuts, but that instead we're dedicating resources to making sure that those positions are present at our school sites. We're also looking at the possibility of bringing in an additional English language specialist who will be able to work with those schools in that setting. So that's one of the ways that you'll see that strategy moving forward based on the theory of action that teachers, when we did our audit last year with the ADE, the teachers who sat down and worked with our English language support specialists who worked on planning and using their instructional strategies and getting feedback from that person, they replicated those practices after the intervention occurred at a better rate than teachers who only went to a training. So we know that if we can replicate this practice in those focus schools, we will get to see better results from the teachers who are there. And Dr. Ailshire, do you have anything you would?
The only, Madam President, governing board members, community cabinet. The only thing I'd probably add to that, Dr. Gonzalez, is just, and you sort of hinted at this, how incredibly important it is that we're aligning, because the question was dealing with the alignment of our fiscal resources. We're one of the only districts that I can think of that continues to provide in-house training for those PSYOP strategies that we know are so critically important. That's something that we have experts on hand with Mary Lou and her department being able to lead, but also investing in those teachers in the site so that we can continue that sort of research-based approach to monitor the impact of that instruction on those teachers in-house, right? If we were to send them to ADE for said training, they wouldn't necessarily have the instructors following them back in the classroom, following up with them and really in cementing that practice. So we do align our fiscal resources to make sure that we're paying those teachers for their time and being able to support them in that planning, that process. But that's part of that larger research-oriented approach of making sure that we're following up and following through beyond the one-stop training.
And I'll just add one more piece. In addition to the super support that we're providing to the focus school teachers, all of our schools have EL as a focus area for their improvement. And so this summer and earlier this year, we provided training for leaders and teachers at the schools in English language development strategies, and we will continue to do that. We're also working to increase the numbers of teachers who have their SEI endorsements. And so as Dr. Ailshire was referencing, we have on-site experts who developed an online training that is used by ADE as well. So these are programs that we know are going to be beneficial to serving our students and the teachers that serve them. So our next question is also from President Bueno. But before that, I think Vice President Trujillo has a question.
I was hoping President Bueno could answer me really quick, but can I please be reminded what the acronym SEI stands for?
Sheltered English Immersion.
Thank
So
you.
it's a strategy to help students who are learning English, learn English in a safe context and helping them to use their natural language and use it to develop. So learning cognates, learning realia, learning how to watch emotion and practice their speaking in a safe environment. And it's a variety of different strategies that our teachers use with that. Thank you for that. And we're trying so hard. We get so wrapped up in our day-to-day existence that we sometimes forget we're using acronyms. So it's always good to remind us to call out, what does that mean? So Board President Bueno's second question is, what are the adult behaviors we need to monitor for the area of focus, both at the focus schools and the rest of the district? And I'm going to turn that over to Dr. Aylshire.
This is an area of intense excitement and passion for our particular department. So as the board knows, we had our leadership retreat with all of our principals and members of the CNI team 2 weeks ago, fairly recently. And one of the most important parts of that was that schools identified what their focus was based on the data, but B, that they sat at a table around what will be essentially their academic support teams. So the academic support teams are members of the CNI department, Dr. Lloyd being a lead on one of them, but every school, every 3 schools has a team. And that team, their focus is really to be there to support in 3 really key areas about adult behaviors. One is the professional development that is going on at the school sites. This year, we've turned over a large portion of our Wednesday professional development back over to the schools with the expectation that the professional development that they develop there will be aligned to their focus and have really clear outcomes and monitoring strategies that the academic focus teams can then support. They will also be there to help with our CTMs. Those are our collaborative team meetings. So those are those times where we're very fortunate in our master schedules, and we were very clear. We'll talk a little bit more about master schedules shortly here, about making sure that all of our schools have designated time for those teams to meet either at grade level or in vertical bands where you might have 2, 3 meeting together, and that's that vertical alignment of standards. Our academic support teams will be coming to observe, coach, see those in action. Really, the whole point of the idea is to make sure that we're seeing what is actually working, what are the best strategies that we are doing as a district, and then bringing that back out to our schools. Very similar to the sort of the mentor-mentee model that Dr. Gonzalez has helped spearhead for our district in terms of just sharing the best practices that are out there, but really leveraging those academic support teams to be able to come in, observe, help conduct walkthroughs, help with the Wednesday professional development, and help observe those CTMs, all with that idea of there's a clear focus of instructional cohesion around whatever the focus is. And as Dr. Gonzalez said, and to your question earlier, that we know that our emerging bilinguals and the work that we're doing, and whether it's certification or best practices, will continually be a focus in those as well. So that will be what we're doing. And it's taken several years for us to kind of get to that point because it requires a lot of trust. I've been in districts, and I think we've all been in districts where the district coming to your school was not necessarily something that you'd welcome or plan for. And it took us some time to get to that point where the district and the team, and I handed over to the professionals like Dr. Lloyd, Director Zelvis over there, also doing all of that incredible work. Every member of this team goes out to those school sites to support, observe, provide feedback, and provide best practices. So those are the ways we ourselves being able to support the adult behaviors that we want to see emphasized, and those that we want to change, but also those that we really want to support and spread.
Board President Bueno's question number 3 is, how will we maintain reaching the goal set for our Black students? And I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Lloyd to talk about.
Thank you. So one of the important things that we have started doing is ensuring that we are monitoring how different groups are doing, right? So we have raised the level of awareness. And then also with each group, like our Black students or African-American students, we are also trying to ensure that they have their own goals and they can be monitoring their own learning, right? The more that we can empower our students with their own learning and understanding the process of learning as well as their progress with that learning, the more likely they are to be able to improve at a faster rate and know when they're making that growth, which improves their own, beliefs that they can do it, right? That they can learn, that they are going to be successful in school. And so that's a big part of helping us, is making sure that, as Dr. Aylshire said, that in those curricular team meetings that they take time not only to look how did the class do generally with XYZ, but also looking at groups of students and how they're doing with that by ethnicity and race for our EL students or ESS students, so that when we plan, we know that we are helping all of our different learners to receive what they need, and it's not just trying to teach to the middle or just teach the textbook, right? We are teaching students. We have to put the students first and foremost. And I'll turn over to Dr. Ilshire to talk a little bit more about some of the practices that we ascribe to and what we think makes classrooms really work.
And I couldn't, I don't think I could say it better than you, Dr. Lloyd, but the practices that he outlined there, those are good for all students. And we keep coming back to this idea that the practices that we're trying to embed in our classrooms, yes, for those subgroups of students, for those groups of students that we really want to reach out to, we really want to focus on them, making sure what we pay attention to is what we're focused on, right? It seems commonsensical, but in the plethora of data that teachers have access and exposure to, the work that his team has been able to lead to really narrow that down, and our principals have been able to become very, very masterful at. That being said, we also know that a lot of the work is rooted in the research of Ms. Zaretta Hammond, who we did a few years ago, and we want to bring that back to some of the new principles that we brought on, and really looking at those culturally responsive practices that the research has been very clear. It doesn't just help students of color. It helps all students when those practices are brought into the classroom. And so bringing back some of those research-based practices and making sure that we're embedding that into the work that we're doing with our teachers and our principals, so they can bring it back and speak to it in their own schools. We could not be more proud of we were talking about it today when we were working on some of our coaching conversations and goal setting for our leaders. We have a phenomenal group of social justice advocates that are now leading our classrooms. And I don't hesitate to say that they're phenomenal individuals. And I think the work that we're continually doing to bring that type of research forward and make sure it's embedded in the best practices for all students will be critical work that we do for this subgroup, our emerging bilingual learners, but really, again, for all of our students.
All right, our next question is from Vice President Trujillo. Please share understanding or examples of the prescribed minutes for teaching and reading and writing, as well as interventions based on individual needs within allocated times across our schools. And then the second part of this question is I would like to understand the different levels of growth based on what is seen going on at the schools. So we talked about master schedules and making sure that there are appropriate minutes allocated. And that's a big part of the work that the curriculum and instruction team is doing with all of our schools to ensure that the time that every student has guaranteed numbers of minutes to receive their instruction. And I'll let Dr. Ilshire speak a little bit more about this, since this is a big part of the work he has headed up.
Well, and again, I want to give credit where credit's due. Dr. Galetti and the entire academic leadership team has been really hard at work at sitting with principals, making sure that we have really clear guidelines, really clear expectations. And to note, we've always had those in terms of the required instructional minutes that we're expecting, but we're trying to get real tight on making sure that it is solidified in these master schedules, that it's aligned to our synergy, that it's fully accounted for. And developing master schedules is an art. It's oftentimes of whack-a-mole where you feel like you've got one area figured out, only to realize there are minutes in another. So I want to give credit to our principals who have been very patient with the submission and then resubmission of their master schedules as we try to get it to that right point. We really are at that moment where we believe that when we look back at our equity plan, this is a huge component of the work that we've wanted to do for the past couple of years, is ensuring that across our campuses, no matter what child is going there, they're receiving that same level of instruction and that much amount of instruction. So take, for example, if you've got a student going to Bethune, you've got a student going to Lowell, right? Your mom, your dad, you've got two kids going to those two different classes. We want to ensure that that student has the same exposure to the number of minutes to really process, understand learning at Lowell as they do at Bethune, right? We want to make sure that no matter where you send your child in our district, we guarantee that those are the minutes that they're going to receive, because the children really need that time and opportunity. And so we've been really working hard to develop that. The other huge part that we've been really focused on is ensuring that there is embedded intervention time in every school day. So this is another big ask that our principals have been willing to take on and work on, is ensuring that our students have opportunities to either get help in areas that they are challenged or struggling in, or also very importantly, Students that need challenge, need extension, need enrichment, we've begun to embed those into those intervention blocks throughout the day. So this will be a really big push, again, going back to those academic leadership teams to observe what's going on during those intervention times, provide feedback, because it is going to be new for some of our campuses to really have that embedded in every single day, and really making sure that time is utilized for student goal setting, for being able to provide that assistance beyond tutoring or homework help, right? How do we really structure that time for individual student groups that really need it, get it down to that individual student level? I think, and again, one more point too, that intervention block is also really utilized for structured English immersion supports and other things for those groups. So for the students that are emergent bilinguals, there is an extra time embedded in the school day for them to get those language supports that they need to be successful. So those can also be embedded into those intervention opportunities as well.
And I'll just add that we're working really hard to, as much as possible, limit the amount of time that a student is pulled out of class. Because too often our students who are pulled out for an intervention miss their grade level content. And that's the worst thing that we can do for a student who's struggling. They need to have exposure to that. And so with our ES population in particular, Ms. Elvis has been working on creating co-teaching opportunities where the special education expert comes and teaches with the classroom teacher. So they're learning strategies from one another, and they're making sure that all students who need additional support are getting additional support, not just a particular group of students. And so that's a strategy that we're very excited about as well. So it means less pull out and more push in of the adults to make more adults visible in the classroom, helping the students with the work.
May I ask another quick question?
You may ask another quick question.
So that answers my question definitely. What leaves me wondering, is the part about based on their individual needs. So that's what you were mentioning, like sometimes it's our, I don't want to say gifted kids, but sometimes they need more challenging stuff to do. They might need, so it really is trying to look at what each of our students either is doing, struggling with, might just need more attention, that kind of individualized. That's the kind of
That's exactly.
observations we're doing. Okay.
Yes. And so, and I want to be clear, there are students for whom there is a federal program designation because of money that's attached to the services that are being provided to them. But every student has an individual need. And so the art of teaching is being able to recognize and help students find what they need and help them to become advocates. And this actually leads to your second question, Board or Vice President Trujillo, looking at the question of how can student voice help us achieve success in some areas of what needs more attention. And there is a great deal of research around student efficacy and student self-advocacy. And so a big part of individual needs is helping students to identify when they're not getting something and being able to advocate for themselves. And in a way that's appropriate and in a way that is supportive of getting the needs that they have. And so when we talk about student voice, this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart, having been a middle school teacher. But there's the self-determination theory really looks at when you give students autonomy to be able to make their own choices, when you give them opportunity to select from a range of different things to do, they're more engaged, they're more present, and they're more willing to take on challenging tasks. And the more that we give them that challenging opportunity to do something, the more they get the message that says, I believe in you and I believe you can do challenging tasks. So we want to make sure that student voice is being incorporated, particularly at the middle grades, because when they go to high school, if they haven't developed student voice, it's easy for them to get lost in the shuffle. And so we want to make sure that as we're looking at what needs more attention, we're giving our teachers and our students the skill to understand what is appropriate student voice and how do I activate it to get what I need. Do you want to add anything to that?
The only piece I'll add is that an incredibly important tool to that is the written curriculum, right? And that falls in again to this department. We're really, really excited for the new ELA curriculum that we have been unpacking and that we're going to be unveiling. It was something that the committee took very seriously in terms of the degree of which it allowed students to engage with the text, engage with each other, and not just simply a written curriculum or written thing that they're going to have to read and produce. It's really needs to be an engaging piece where it gives plenty of opportunities for students to do that, again, especially at all grade levels. I mean, kindergarten kids need to be speaking and engaging, but those middle school grade levels especially too as well. And we are I am definitely looking forward to the social studies adoption, because that's going to be another critical curriculum piece that we're going to be looking at and really wanting to make sure that there's opportunities for our students to engage in it in an interdisciplinary context, that they're going to be able to see themselves, see their communities in that, and be able to really represent themselves in this new curriculum that we're really excited for. So definitely encourage our community soon, our board, to be part of that process, because it's going to be super rad.
That's the technical term, super rad.
Can I add one just anecdote really quickly from our leadership summit last week with one of our schools, Principal Claire Sells, and we were talking about this some and some of the ideas, you know, that they had to also a student voice be asking students to give feedback on what they're experiencing, right? As a learner, do you feel like you are getting all the resources you need, helping establish an open line of communication so that advocacy can and does happen, as well as them just being able to reflect on their life as a learner and on their life generally, through writing, through reading and projects and so forth. And so I'm excited that is part of the planning and the focus for schools, is to truly understand who they're working with, because I know the more that we understand our students, what they need and who they are and what they want, I think that's part of equity too. It's not just what we want for them, right? And how we want everybody to be this, but also what they want and how to ensure that we provide and support their journey.
Do you see why I was excited about this conversation? So looking at our next slide, I'm going to have Dr. Lloyd talk about this, because there's really interesting data here that we can unpack, and also looking at, again, what's working and what needs more attention. So Dr. Lloyd, I'll turn it to you.
So one of the things that we are using these data for is to help us think about, for next year, how each school needs to be setting their own goals for each grade level as well, right? So that we have our board goals, they're reflected in our interim goals, that are reflected at the site goals, that, you know, for schools and teachers and all the way down to students, and that they all align in there's coherence. And when we looked at these data, so then we start looking at, okay, who can we support more based on where they've been, where they are, the progress that they've made in the last couple of years, both using ASA data as well as our interim benchmark data from iReady, Ainsworth Plus, in this case, iReady, to be able to identify schools who we know have a trend that we want to disrupt, right? That we want to change, because we're not seeing students as they get into the upper grades having all the foundational literacy needs met, as well as being able to have the access to grade level that they need. And so that's where we took these data and looked at who could use those supports most. We looked at it here, but then we looked at it across our other goals as well, to try and ensure that we provided focus for different schools strategically, so that we can disrupt the trends that we need to, and encourage and replicate the ones that we do want to see. Anything else, Dr. Gonzalez? Or actually, I think Dr. Ailshire is going to talk about some of the next steps with that work of focus schools.
And I don't want to read a slide out, but I definitely do want to point out when we talk about what needs more attention, we've outlined many of these things already in this conversation in terms of providing time in the master schedule for intervention, the alignment of our fiscal resources to support those interventionists that are doing that important work, take them out of the site budgets. As a principal, I can tell you that is a huge gift to be able to take that out of a site budget so I can have the utilization and autonomy. So I know that was very well received by our leadership, but it also demonstrates our commitment. Emphasis on English language development strategies. We talked about how we have that in-house now, where we're really building a cohort of teachers and action researchers, if you will, that are implementing these and following through in their own classrooms. And again, cannot talk enough about the role of Ms. Gonzalez and her team, Ms. Izara, to be doing all of that work. And they're just phenomenal. We're totally blessed to have them. We talked about the use of curriculum that we're trying to adopt that really allows and lends itself to teaching across disciplinaries. The research is very clear that when you teach across discipline, right, where you link science to ELA, when you link social studies to mathematics, there becomes more cohesion, more coherence, as we talked about. We talked a lot about where you're going to be hearing us talk about that for a couple of years now. So I hope that's okay. But that coherence in the instruction, that students don't have to unpack meaning in their day. Everything makes sense to them because it is essentially linked. That meaning making is an incredible brain drain for our students. We want to eliminate that so that their school day makes sense to them from subject to subject area. Instructional planning to support and increasing our students' proficiency, implementation of the new ELA curriculum, which we're incredibly excited for, and being able to take a really innovative and engaging curriculum and really make it our own. And our teachers are really engaged in that process. And then, of course, opportunities for families to provide families with more resources to help their students. And we're actually going to be talking about that in our very next slide, that specific point.
And this is a question that President Bueno posed. What is the strategy to identify families that need the most support for their students? And so we have a couple of different ways that we want to focus on this. One, we've talked about adding family literacy events, both at the early childhood level and at the middle school level, because we know that families are the child's first teacher. And so how do we maximize on the natural gifts that a parent brings, or a tata or a nana that brings to their children and their grandchildren or their tias and their nietos? Thinking about all of that, how do we bring the knowledge and the skills that the family has and helps them bring literacy home? Not in a way that says you have to do it in English. Doing it in your native language is just as important. And so helping our families with some of the resources that we can help them with, giving them access to books, but also giving them access to journals, giving them writing prompts, giving them some suggestions for how to talk to your children about what they're reading. And again, coming back to that idea of student voice. How do we let our children read things that are interesting to them, write about things that are interesting to them? How do we tie what they're learning at school back to something that's meaningful to them? So thinking about things like Kids Right Now, having them do first-person narratives where they're going back and interviewing members of their family and asking about their childhood, or asking about a world event that their families have experienced, and hearing the story from that perspective, being able to write it up and then share that with someone else, researching topics that are interesting to them, giving them those opportunities and letting the student voice drive the direction that they go. But that's not necessarily innate for us to know to do that with our students, particularly if we've been taught that what the school says is the right thing and don't argue with the school. We want to help them to see that that isn't necessarily the way to go. Instead, we're all part of the formula of helping our students learn. So that's having those events is one way. The other way that we can begin to do that is identifying, when Dr. Lloyd was showing us the data on the previous slide, we can see the numbers of students. In parentheses, you see the sample size at each of the school sets. Those are the numbers of students that we have. And then from that, we can identify which students are struggling and then do targeted mailings and targeted phone calls and say, please come and join us for this event. We would love to have you. We've also talked about with our new synergy system being able to do some program evaluation where we can actually identify these are the students whose families came to events on more than one occasion. Because we know one occasion is just sort of you came and you've been anointed, but we want to get you fully inculcated into the program. So who's attended more than once? And then for those families that did attend on more than one occasion, what do the outcomes for their students look like? Do we actually see an increase in that? And that goes along, like we've talked about before, the training with our family and community engagement specialists, bringing the reading interventionists to be part of that so that what we're training and teaching our families is actually grounded in research-based practices. Do you want to add anything?
I would just add that the work of Dr. Zilich also aligns a lot to this question. She is our coordinator for student success, and she really oversees our multi-tiered systems of support, right? So looking at multiple sets of data, you know, from behavior, attendance, academic skills and knowledge to be able to identify students who need additional supports and establish plans and systems for supporting them in their class, in and outside of the classroom as much as possible. And so that's something that she has headed up and passionate about, and creating urgency with, and establishing a guiding coalition to help ensure that again, we are addressing the level of need for students, starting with the academics, because that's we're educators, but helping support families in the process as well.
Thank you. That's the strategy I was looking for, was more targeted in terms of knowing where the student needs more support and ringing those alarms for their families. Because I think what you shared earlier, the first half was, you know, the standard of what we should be doing, but that's why I asked like about like furthermore the strategy, because you know, if a parent thinks that, oh, you know, a B or C is fine, but if they start, you know, seeing the other data points and then ringing those alarms, I think is our responsibility. So thank you for that answer.
We all need to be ringing alarms and finding the ways to make the alarm stop ringing. So our next question from Vice President Trujillo asks the question, please share some understanding about the population sizes and why they vary in the data slides 1, 2, and 3. And so very quickly, I can tell you on slide 1, that's the goal that we set in the fall. And so the population sizes for goal 1 are based on the numbers of students present at that point in time, because that's the data that we gathered there. Then when we look at slide 2, these are the numbers of students in those population sizes currently, because that's our current data. And then when we go back to slide 5, those numbers are different because those are actually the numbers of students in 8th grade at the school when we're drawing this data. So those population sizes differ based on when the data is taken. And so it's real-time data that Dr. Lloyd is pulling and using for these monitoring reports.
I can clarify, we could change it where we only report on students who have been with us the entire year. And in many cases, that is a more fair comparison. However, we also want to ensure every child that comes, we report on so that everybody is clear on where we're at with all the children that we have. When we get to talking about accountability, that is where we have to say, okay, well, what is the fairest comparison to make? And that's when you start pulling kids out because they haven't been in our district since the beginning of the year and they haven't been at school, you know, this % of the time. But in this case, we are trying to track all students that we have to make sure that, I think in part too, so that we can plan for all of them. And then, you know, if they stay with us, then we can continue to support them in the right ways. It is a challenge our district has, right? We're a fairly mobile district with students coming in and out all the time. And when you look, I don't know if you're looking specifically at different groups, but that can fluctuate very quickly based again on different things that are happening, such as housing opening up. So that's where you'll see some of those fluctuations in the numbers.
All right, our next slide talks again about some of these focus schools, and I will turn it over to Dr. Elshire to talk a little bit more about some of the ideas that we have here.
So obviously our schools have very different need. We're going to have a presentation later this evening about the equitable allocation of resources and how we really ensure that we support our schools at the different places that they are. To that point, you can see, for example, if we have an interim goal, identified focus schools will go from fewer than 9% of 6th through 7th grade students reading on grade in winter of 2024 to greater than 15% by winter of 2026. That's a different lift for different campuses, right? Because you're going to have some campuses, for example, we've got the data here on Garfield, that's a 10% gain that Garfield will need to make, and Whittier would need to essentially make an 8% gain. So we want to make sure that if we have schools that are needing that extra push, that they, in order to achieve our goals, that they need to make higher ground or faster ground than others, that we then are equitably allocating the resources and supports to those schools in those focus areas. So for example, if we've got a focus school that is in early literacy, the K-3 early literacy, we're going to ensure that we have enough spots and we're paying for enough spots for all the teachers at those campuses, plus you, to attend letters training, which we know to be a research-based strategy that has been helping our schools that have had the opportunity to take that and provide that to our teachers during the contracted workday to make sure that they've got those early literacy strategies at their disposal. We talked again about the use of English language development coaching and being able to get more and more and more of our teachers appropriately certified in the SIOP strategies. This was something that back in the day was a mandatory aspect to certification that kind of dropped off the mark, and we're really wanting to make sure that all of our teachers have that level of certification and that level of knowledge of the research of best practices that not only help our emergent bilinguals, but again, they're good practices for all of the students. They're good, solid language-based strategies. And then again, initiative number 3 about the family literacy events. And Dr. Gonzalez talked to the work that we're working to really do our own research on what are the outcomes for families and for children that do attend these family literacy events. When we have that happen, we tend to say, oh, here's your learning, or here's your kit. Hopefully we see you at the next one. But we really want to actually then do follow-ups and really track in meaningful ways, both qualitative and quantitatively, what are the outcomes for those students that are able to attend those events, for those families that are able to attend those events. And then for me, being a big fan of qualitative research, taking the families that have attended multiple of those events and getting their feedback on what are they getting from those events, what did they see in terms of their own practices. The data will tell us one thing, but I think some of those selected focus groups will also help us a lot in terms of identifying its effectiveness. So these are just some of the strategies that we're looking at. Depending on what a school's focus is, different strategies may be brought to bear, different resources may be brought to bear to support them, because we know that all of our schools need some level of assistance. It's just going to vary school by school, and we're not going to do a prescribed burn on everybody. We want everyone to have an equal opportunity, equal emphasis, depending on what they need.
Thank you, Dr. Elshire. Now, I'm going to ask Randy to keep this slide up here because this is a really great example of a strategy called close reading and questioning the author. And it's a strategy we want our students to use. So President Bueno said she has a clarifying question. Interim goal 4.0 is the goal fewer than 9% of 6th to 7th individual students or 6th to 7th, 8th grade students? And so that is a great question. And that's exactly what we talked about, having our students advocate for themselves. Close reading says, oh, wait, 6 to 7, that could mean individual, or it could mean 6th and 7th grade. In this case, it does mean 6th and 7th grade. The other great skill is questioning the author to make sure you have understanding of the author's intent. Her other question is about this, and she said, if the board were to adopt this monitoring report of target goal number 4, would the interim goal 4.0 be automatically adopted? And the answer to that is no. So these are proposed, and what will happen is that we still have work to do to make sure that we've got the right data sets, that we've got the right theory of action. And so when we come together in August, we will bring to you all new interim goals for each of the goals that we're working to achieve. And at that time, you will hopefully adopt or send us back to keep working on them, the interim goals for our big goals that the board has set for us. So this adoption of this report does not include adopting this as an interim goal.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, because I think this is the second modern report that we've have learned about these new focus school initiatives. So I just needed that clarification, and I agree with getting them all in August and working on them. So thank you.
We want to be sure that when we're adopting our interim goals, because the idea of the interim goal is that it is predictive of where we're going. So we want to make sure that this is really leading us in the direction that we want to go.
Thank you.
Next, actually, you're going to skip 2 slides. Thank you, Randy. So the next question is from Vice President Trujillo. What are some evidence-based research examples used when developing areas to focus what's working, what needs attention, and new interim goals and focus areas? And I know we've been talking about the research behind many of these throughout, but I'll turn it over to Dr. Ailshire to add anything that we may have missed in that conversation.
Well, and I'll also, Dr. Lloyd, feel free to interrupt at any point, because I know this is definitely your area of expertise as well. So many of the things that we're talking about are what we are known to be best research practices, right? Making sure that our leaders are empowered with data, making sure that they are able to identify subgroups of students, their individual needs, their individual skill sets. I'm looking out over Director Zelvis. One of the major initiatives that she's leading is co-teaching with our exceptional education students, pushing in. This goes back to what Dr. Gonzalez was talking about in terms of your traditional model of exceptional student education is you're pulling that kid out, right? And they're getting something. Pushing in a co-teaching model, which Director Zelvis is leading the charge on, that is making sure that both teachers have equal understanding of the needs of all the students in those classrooms and are able to teach together, as opposed to any students being pulled out. Not only does this prevent students from accessing the content with their grade level peers, research also finds that it actually stigmatizes the student, right? That when you pull out these groups of students, students pay attention, and when these kids leave the classroom, there's a message there. So we're really working to be a district of inclusion, a district of equity, and I really thank Director Zelvis on the work that she's doing to ensure that we are embedding all of our ES teachers with co-teaching strategies, and then making sure that co-teaching strategies and that research is also being applied to the classroom teacher, because they are going to be a team in doing that process. And so that's really exciting work that we know is grounded in best theory and best practices. We talked a lot about the work that we're doing in embedding the SIOP strategies. The other one, and I didn't really mention it, and I should have, which is that there is a solid base of theory on what's called sufficient time for learning, right? That you need to provide students with a block of structured time to actually learn, engage, and process. That is part of the reason we didn't just magically pick the numbers for our master schedule out of the air, right? We didn't say it has to be 130 minutes, right? We had to go back into the research and look, what does the research tell us when a kid, and that's why we vary. The amount of instructional minutes for a student that is in their K3, K5 in ELA is different than students that are in their upper grade levels, because research is very clear that those students at those early grade levels need more time with their language, right? And then we can begin to build out into math and all the implications that it has. So when we talk about our master schedule, and even that is based on best theory and best research practices, because we had to go back, and again, Dr. Galletti in the work. Yes, please go.
So I could have articulated the question a little bit better.
Please do.
I guess I want to know what it looks like when you go looking for research. Is it journal articles? Is it PD, like that you go out of the district to find? Do you visit other schools? Like where do you find this research? What does that part look like?
The research that we draw on is generally research that's conducted through universities, but we also do our own research. One of the goals that we have is that everything that we do, it's nice to have research that's been vetted through appropriate journals and verified in a variety of different situations. But it's also nice for us to recognize our setting is unique. And so how do we take what we've read in research, apply it and test it ourselves and verify that it works with our students and in our setting? That's an important component of being able to replicate the research that we see. But largely it comes from research journals that are from higher education. It comes from our own practices and our own experiences that we're able to say, this is what the steps were in bringing that forward, and this is how it's been replicated. We also do visit other schools. We talk on a regular basis. I talk with our superintendent partners. We talk with our curriculum partners. We participate in a research group of assessment and evaluation people. So it's something that's happening throughout. And in fact, we're working on the possibility of starting a doctoral cohort for people in our district who want to continue doing this research, particularly in investigating how does a student outcomes focused governance, how does that cascading of goals and guardrails impact what happens in the school site and in the classroom to get the kinds of results that we want? So research is something that we're very immersed in. I think, as people who all have their doctorates, it's not that you have to have a doctorate to be a researcher, but we love research. And so it's just something we love to come to and that we love bringing to the work that we're doing. And the last question from President Trujillo, or Vice President Trujillo, is may we understand more about how family reading nights results will be measured to support progress monitoring report data in the future? And this goes back to research again. So part of the research would be through a program evaluation that we talked about, identifying those students that we ring the alarm for, that we encourage the families to participate, and then tracking how many times the families come. That's the quantitative, the numerical part of the research that we'd be looking at, and we'd be able to correlate the numbers of times that they came and the results that the student gets in terms of the gains that they make on their reading. But there will be other factors that are going to play into that. There will be strategic tutoring. There will be other interventions that are happening at the school site. So the other part of the research that we need to do is the qualitative, the storytelling aspect of what is happening in our schools. So what's happening from a teacher perspective for these students that we've identified? From the family perspective, as Dr. Ailshire said, understanding from them what compelled them to be present, what compelled them to stick with it, and what did they feel as a result of being able to participate. That's an important component to the work that we want to do. All of that, when we talk about program evaluation, that's really another form of research that we use to know this is something that's working or this is something that isn't working because we now know this was off-putting. We need to make a change. And so that's the way that we want to use that.
So what I'm hearing, I think, is this will be a new strategy for starting to implement our two-way communication stuff, where we're supposed to be engaging with the community and getting that feedback. So is that? Does
Yeah,
that
I
make
think
sense?
two-way communication is something that has to be going on constantly. So that's
far as
one
the
subset
qualitative,
of people that we would be working with on that. But all of the work that we do on a day-to-day basis is a two-way communication stream. We don't always have a formal structure to be able to document it in that way, but this would be a perfect example of that.
That helps because I was trying to think about what does that look like going forward with our families and what those opportunities could be. So that helps, at least that's where my brain's going with it. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Anything you would like to add, Dr. Lloyd?
I mean, just one thing I'd say about this question is that not all initiatives may have the same impact on outcomes. They may be more in the field of inputs and outputs. For example, the number of minutes that students may end up reading at home since they're going to the family nights versus if they're not, right? And so we may be able to gather some of those data, but it may not always show up in, they've improved placement level or performance on a benchmark assessment. And the other thing too is with quantitative and qualitative is understanding as well the impact on the students' own self-beliefs. I think oftentimes we overlook how important it is that they feel like they are readers, they are thinkers, they are learners, right? And that they're a part of a learning community, right? And I think that's one of the important pieces of having initiatives like this, is ensuring that we have a community built around students so that they know they can be successful and they can be part of the learning that's going on at their school. They're not just going to school and feeling like they can't do it.
Well, thank you. That concludes our questions, right? Thank you. I just want to really acknowledge and celebrate our African American students who did hit their target goal. I think that's a huge victory and a foundation, especially since they're 8th grade moving on to high school. Congratulations. It really means a lot to be able to see them hit their target. And then also I want to recognize Lowell's work, increasing 17%, Kenilworth increasing 16%, and Herrera at 12%. So, we spent a lot of time working on this governance model, and it was for a reason. It was to make sure that we are progress monitoring and look at the data. We have a lot to celebrate. We're not where we need to be, where we had set out to be, but we're taking those steps to be able to hit our goals. So again, congratulations to all the staff. Everybody had a part in the success that we are seeing in this report. So thank you so much.
And thank you for that acknowledgement of those schools. They did work incredibly hard, and for our African-American students who really do deserve credit for the work that they were able to accomplish. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Moving on to C3, I motion that we approve the student outcome focused governance progress monitoring report of board goal number 4.
Alicia Vink, I second.
Roll call for Ms. Jessica Bueno,
Aye.
Dr. Alicia Vink,
Aye.
and Ms. Carmen Trujillo.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to D, community communications. Do we have any?
We do not have any.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to approval of consent agenda. May I get a motion?
Carmen Trujillo, so moved.
Alicia Vink, I second.
Roll call for Ms. Jessica Bueno,
Aye.
Dr. Alicia Vink,
Aye.
and Ms. Carmen Trujillo.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to F, executive session. Number 1, the governing board may convene an executive session pursuant to ARS section 38-431.03A1 for the purpose of evaluation of the superintendent. And we will be discussing item 1 and 2. So number 2, the governing board may convene an executive session pursuant to ARS section 38-431.03A3 for the purpose of receiving legal advice from the attorney for the public body regarding the board's options with respect to the superintendent's performance pay. May I get a motion to adjourn to executive session?
This is Carmen Trujillo. I move that we adjourn into executive session.
Alicia Vink, I second.
Roll call for Ms. Jessica Bueno,
Aye.
Dr. Alicia Vink,
Aye.
and Ms. Carmen Trujillo.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will pause our regular meeting and convene to executive session, and we will be back when we're back.